Hi guys, and thank you so much for joining me. If you are new here, I'm Kat and I like to talk about true crime, conspiracies and all sorts of related things. Today I want to talk to you about Takoda Collins. But before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. All the information I'm giving you in today's video is already found in the public domain, and I will also give you my opinions on it. On this particular occasion, I'm actually not going to be respectful to the people I'm talking about in the video, apart from the victim obviously, because they do not deserve any grain or whatever you want to call it of respect, because they are just scumbags. So anyway, a major warning from the beginning. Throughout this video there will be explicit description, content, possibly photos as well, of continuous child abuse. So please, if this is not something that you feel comfortable watching, please just stop watching the video now. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. And for everyone else who is interested in hearing about a case which you don't really see covered in the media, and which should be, but it's not, then please stay on and let's get started. On December 18th, 2008, just a few days before Christmas, a handsome baby boy is born to Robin Collins and Al-Muhatan McLean in Wisconsin. This was the most precious Christmas gift anyone could ask for. But was it? Takoda Collins was a bright and smart 10-year-old boy, exceptionally intelligent. He loved reading and he was truly creative. He loved to dance and rap. He would also create or complete lyrics better than anyone. In rare photos of Takoda, you see a genuinely happy boy enjoying life. You wouldn't imagine in a million years the hell he went through in his short life at the hands of his own dad, one who should have been a fatherly figure, one who should have protected him, reassured him when he had nightmares, telling him there are no monsters. Yet his dad was the monster in his room, and Takoda's nightmares were his every living hours of every day and night. This is the tragic story of Takoda Collins, and this will be my last trigger warning. Extremely disturbing child abuse being described. There will be explicit description of abuse, torture, rape and starvation of a child. So this is the last trigger warning, like I just mentioned. If this is not something that you can watch, then please stop watching the video now. I could very well avoid the explicit details, but I am not going to sugarcoat something which cannot be sugarcoated with any amount of sugar in this world. And this is something which happened in real life, and I think this little boy deserves his story to be told. The world needs to know exactly what he went through in his short life. And let's start with a quick timeline leading up to the end of Takoda Collins' life. When Takoda was almost 1 year old, on November the 12th, 2009, his mother, Robin Collins, admits to Wisconsin police she hit Takoda. After receiving probation, Robin loses custody of Takoda. On December the 9th, 2011, her probation is revoked and she's sent to prison. It's believed, according to her, it was because of drug use. Anita Britson is a family friend of Takoda's biological mother, Robin. When Takoda was born and Robin was unable to care for him, Anita and her fiancé took the baby into their home, even working to adopt him.
A happy baby. He was a happy infant.
For 11 months, Anita Bredesen and her fiancé raised newborn Takoda Collins as his mother came by often to check on him. But when he was 11 months old, Anita says the mother's boyfriend at the time spanked the child hard enough to trigger an investigation from Children's Services. They say for several years, Takoda lived with 3 different foster families as a result. Al-Muhatan McLean, Takoda's biological father, who's in custody now in connection with the death, was not around.
He never called. He never saw Takoda until he got with, I suppose, Human Services or Child Support would have gotten a hold of him.
Anita says McLean came for him out of the blue one day.
He came to Wisconsin and did a DNA test, and he was Dakoda's father. So they took Dakota from my fiance and gave him to a complete stranger.
She says her fiancé was in the process of formally adopting Takoda, but the last they saw him was at his 4th birthday party.
From 11 months from when he was abused to the time they gave him to Al, his dad. Brian was trying to get custody the whole time.
Anita says he was a happy baby. He was a happy infant. For 11 months, Anita and her fiancé raised newborn Takoda Collins, as his mother came by often to check on him. But when he was 11 months old, Anita says the mother's boyfriend at the time spanked the child hard enough to trigger an investigation from Children's Services. For several years, Takoda lived with 3 different foster families. Al-Mutahan McLean, Takoda's biological father, was not around. Anita says he never called, he never saw Takoda until he got whiff. I suppose Human Services or Child Support would have gotten a hold of him. Anita also says McLean came for Takoda out of nowhere, out of the blue one day. He came to Wisconsin and did a DNA test, and he was Takoda's father. So they took Takoda from my fiancé and gave him to a complete stranger. She says her fiancé was in the process of formally adopting Takoda, but they last saw him at his 4th birthday party. Anita learned of Takoda's death the day after it was announced in December. April the 5th, 2012, Al-Muhatan McLean hits and chokes a man in Wisconsin who he thinks has his phone. He pleads guilty to disorderly conduct. On October 21, 2013, Takoda's mom, Robin Collins, writes to the court asking for Al, the dad, to be prevented from taking Takoda out of state, claiming his treatment of Takoda is under investigation by child welfare officials in Wisconsin. On October 23, 2013, Al receives permanent sole custody of Takoda after having temporary custody since at least July 2013. On October 26, 2013, Al McLean is accused of hitting his fiancée Amanda Heinze over the head with a pipe, dragging her by her hair to a car and punching her before driving away with her in Wisconsin. Charges were later dismissed by a prosecutor there. On February 26, 2014, Robin Collins writes to the Wisconsin court that Al McLean moved with Takoda to Union City, Tennessee. He ripped him out of school and left. I have no idea what's going on. Without CPS involved and any information, I'm not even sure how he is, she writes. On June 30th, 2014, Al McLean files with the Wisconsin court his intent to move with Takoda to Pennsylvania. Takoda's mom signs a notarized letter agreeing to the move, then writes a handwritten letter days later saying she was bullied and pressured into signing the first letter. On August 18, 2014, is Takoda's first day of school at Horace Mann Elementary School in Dayton. Takoda's enrollment date is unknown, but school officials confirmed he was a student there starting in 2014. On October the 20th, 2014, Wisconsin court rules that Al McLean is allowed to move with Takoda to Pennsylvania. Robin Collins, Takoda's mother, maintains visitation rights. On December 30th, 2014, Amanda Heinze, Al's fiancée, the same one he beat over the head and dragged in the car, buys a house on Kensington Drive in Dayton. On February 19, 2016, Montgomery County Children's Services calls Dayton police for a well check regarding possible abuse of Takoda's 9-year-old brother. No one answers the door when officers arrive. On March the 6, 2016, Amanda Heinze calls police saying Al McLean is drunk and refusing to leave. Officers respond and allegedly find Al drunk and argumentative. They advise Amanda of the eviction process. On May 25, 2016, Amanda calls police crying hysterically, saying Al hit her and won't leave. Officers respond and no charges are filed. On June 9, 2016, Amanda calls Dayton police saying a neighbor is intoxicated and threatening to kill her. Police arrive and allegedly find that both the neighbor and Al appear to be intoxicated and fighting. Incident ends with no one taken into custody. On July 26, 2016, a caller who gives the name Al contacts police from the Kensington Drive home to report that he was assaulted by a woman. Caller disconnects from dispatchers several times as officers gather information. Incident ends with no one taken into custody. On August 2, 2016, Montgomery County Sheriff's Office serves a civil protection order to Al-McLean. Records show it was from a woman he met locally who says he assaulted her in July 2016. The protection order was dismissed because the incident didn't meet the threshold for an order. On August 20, 2016, Takoda's older brother runs away from the Dayton home. Once found, he tells police that he is forced to do squats while holding a heavy backpack as punishment. Police contact Children's Services and officers are told a referral was made. Police attempt to search the Kensington Drive address but couldn't access some parts because of pit bulls. Officers notice cameras inside and outside the house, but Al-McLean tells them the cameras don't record and were only present for show. On September 14, 2016, Al-McLean calls Dayton police to report someone had broken into his house and threatened his family at gunpoint because of a dispute about a wheelchair. Police records say Amanda's sister, Jennifer Ebert, Takoda, and his brother were home when the incident happened. Al-McLean gives police video of the incident captured on his cameras. On July 29, 2017, Amanda calls police reporting that people she doesn't know are yelling and threatening her. Officers respond and find the issue is over a grass-cutting disagreement. On May 11, 2018, Dayton Public Schools worker and Montgomery County Children's Services request a welfare check on Takoda because of fears he was being abused. Police respond to Kensington Drive house and get no answer at the door. Between May the 12th and May 24th, 2018, Takoda is pulled from school by his father before the end of the school year, but the exact date is unknown, according to multiple Dayton school officials. School staff say they never saw the boy again. On July the 1st, 2018, Takoda is formally withdrawn from school and is homeschooled. On November 14, 2018, Dayton police respond to an argument between residents at Kensington Drive house. This agreement centers around someone allowing their friend to park a car in front of the house. On November 18, 2018, Al-McLean and Amanda Heinze called Dayton police complaining Takoda is being unruly. Al asks police to take the boy to the Juvenile Justice Center. Once Takoda is in the back seat, his dad says he doesn't want to press charges and will take Takoda to Kettering Hospital. Hospital officials say he never went there. On May 6, 2019, Robin Collins, Takoda's mom, files motion for contempt in Wisconsin court against Al-McLean. Mr. McLean has never brought Takoda to see me since he has left the state. I have spoken to him once on the phone in 4 years, she writes. On May 13, 2019, Wisconsin court dismisses Robin's motion, saying the case is in the jurisdiction of Ohio since Takoda lives there now. On May 14, 2019, Robin calls Dayton police, telling them she believes her son is being abused by McLean.
Working with her 10-year-old son in 4 years until just a few days prior, she tells the dispatcher she thought Takoda was living with his father, Al-Muhatan McLean, in Erie, Pennsylvania. Only a legal issue put him back on her radar.
I believe that his father is abusing him and hurting him, and that he's too scared to tell anybody because his father won't let him talk to anybody.
May 14th, 2019, almost 7 months later to the day, 10-year-old Takoda Collins is found unresponsive in a Dayton home on Kensington Drive and later pronounced dead. A woman identifying herself as Takoda's mother calling Dayton emergency responders, asking for officers to perform a wellness check.
I've been trying to work with him to talk to my son, and he gave me a bunch of things that are very concerning. He locked him in locked him in his room. He tried to jump out a window. He sent him to school in a diaper. He pulled him out of school. He whipped him with a belt. Just a bunch of stuff that's very concerning to me.
The woman says Al-Muhatan McLean has sole custody of the child, but that she was supposed to see him 4 times a year and speak with him on the phone once a week. But she says she hadn't seen him or heard from him in 4 years until 2 days prior. She explains what she heard on that phone call.
Telling him how angry he is with him and how if I don't come and get him, something's going to happen and he's going to take him to a group home and drop him off, and how when he acts up, how he disciplines him with a belt and he'll lock him in the room.
An incident report from regional dispatch showing 2 officers visited the home a short time later. The report states, quote, Takoda is being taken care of. Al, the father, appears to be taken care of his needs with no concerns.
So this is a second or third phone call so far that she gives to the police, suspecting he's being abused. Police respond and dispatch records say they believe Takoda was being cared for. Records don't say whether Children's Services was contacted. Al-Mutahan McLean, Amanda Heinze, and Jennifer Abbott's reign of terror over 10-year-old Takoda Collins ended on December 13, 2019, when the torture inflicted by Al, Takoda's father, Takoda's biological father, was finally too much for this child to survive. Al had inflicted injury to every part of Takoda's body. The abuse on Takoda's last day was unimaginable. Al-Mutahan McLean beat his child, stood on him, pushing his full weight on the child's body, forced him into water as Takoda could be heard struggling. In his final acts of humiliation, rage, and torture, Al repeatedly forced a broken chair leg deep into Takoda's rectum. Even more tragic than the facts surrounding Takoda's death were the facts of the life he endured in the House of Horrors that was 1934 Kensington. From as early as his first grade year in 2015, Takoda suffered daily excessive abuse inflicted by his biological father, Al McLean, and encouraged and facilitated by his self-appointed stepmother, Amanda Heinze, and her sister, Jennifer Abbott. When Al McLean and Amanda Heinze withdrew Takoda from school in 2018 at age 9, they perfected his isolation from the world, and unchecked could escalate their extreme abuse and torture. Although the extreme abuse existed while he was in school, from the time of Takoda being withdrawn from school, his entire life was revolved around being locked in an empty attic, denied clothing, food, light, and access to a bathroom. Every single day and night of Takoda's life consisted of constant, unending torture. For entire days, 20 hours a day, he was forced to pose in bizarre and painful punishment positions. While Takoda suffered in his torture poses, the 3 idiots, including his biological father, would monitor him from the comfort of their furnished living room or bedrooms. When Takoda dared move from the torture position chosen by his father, Al would horrifically beat him as a punishment. If Al McLean didn't notice Takoda moving from that position, Amanda and Jennifer would alert Al so that he could execute the punishment for the child's perceived disobedience. When Takoda, who had no other alternative, defecated in his filthy attic, Al McLean became enraged and forced Takoda to eat his own feces, even as Takoda begged and struggled against him. Takoda then learned that this was expected of him and began to eat his own feces to avoid his dad force-feeding it to him. The crimes of Al McLean, which were aided and supported by his fiancée and her sister, represent the worst kind of humans. Humans, not even animals do that. He provided no mercy to his own son, and so he deserves none. And for their part in the excessive abuse, isolation, and torture and death of Takoda, and without showing any mercy, Amanda and Jennifer don't deserve any mercy either. On December 13, 2019, the nightmare of Takoda's life ended when McLean's severe beatings, water torture, and the brutal rape were finally too much for the 10-year-old child's body to withstand. Al, unable to revive Takoda for another round of torture, called 911. The call is disturbing. Rather than focusing on the current condition of his son, Al spends most of the call complaining about what terrible child Takoda was and how difficult he was to parent. At one point, when Al is instructed to give CPR, he can be heard retching and then complains it smells real rotten inside of his stomach. But of course, what else would you expect when you stepped on him with all your weight? What else can you expect? On arrival, paramedics found McLean waiting at the door. The child, Takoda Collins, battered and bruised from head to toe, was lying alone, unresponsive, on the floor of the living room. Dayton Police Officer Evans also responded as paramedics tended to Takoda. Amanda and Jennifer were not present. To allow the medics to work without distraction, Officer Evans started talking to Al on the porch, during which Al still continued his rant about his uncivilized, uncontrollable child. His complaints to Officer Evans, which are repeated in his formal interview, included claims that the child ate his own feces on the regular. Al also tried to explain away all the bruising on Takoda as being self-inflicted dramatics of an uncontrollable child putting on a show. Although paramedics focused on attempts to resuscitate Takoda, the evidence of abuse was clearly present all over his body. At one point, paramedics indicate Takoda has passed. Al's response to the news of the death of his own child was, "Alright, I tried to get you guys here as fast as I could." Even still, medics continued to try to revive the child, including transporting him by ambulance to the hospital. Resuscitation was impossible, and Takoda, age 10, was pronounced deceased in the emergency department at Children's Hospital. Once at Children's Hospital, Dr. Liker, an expert in pediatrics specializing in abuse, had an opportunity to externally examine the deceased child. Takoda was battered from head to toe. Dr. Liker noticed hundreds of lacerations and abrasions to Takoda's head, face, mouth, neck, chest, abdomen, back buttocks, arms, hands, legs, and feet. Also, the doctor also noticed extensive bruising to his entire body, including his scalp, face, inside of his mouth, neck, chest, abdomen, buttocks, arms, legs, and feet. Patterned abrasions were found on his chest, abdomen, buttocks, and posterior legs. Older scars, patterned and non-patterned, were seen on his torso and extremities. Injuries, lacerations, and bruising were also visible externally in the anal area. To Dr. Liker's expert eye, these extent and nature of the injuries were not consistent with accident or self-infliction. They were the result of severe physical abuse or torture on numerous occasions over a period of time. Many of the injuries were in areas that are very difficult to bruise. Many of the injuries were in defensive locations. The areas of the body, such as the back of the arms and posterior of the body, exposed when someone tries to protect themselves from blows. There was also evidence of prior rib fractures that were not visible in the child's 2018 hospitalization for jumping out of the window. Dr. Liker also indicated that the child's basic needs include safe, healthy living conditions, clothing, regular medical care, and schooling, and because this was not provided, it is neglect. In 2018, Takoda was evaluated by the hospital and referred for behavioral health therapy. However, the efforts by the hospital to connect Takoda with these services were rejected by the family, which is medical neglect. Dr. Liker said, based on Takoda's injuries and condition, any reasonable caregiver should have sought medical attention for him, and the failure to do so is also neglect. So then, if everything points to obvious neglect, why was Takoda left to die? Why was Al even allowed to take his life? Why no one cared enough about Takoda to save him? As disturbing as the external presentation of Takoda's injuries was, it was the internal examination performed by Deputy Coroner Dr. Brian Castow that told the true depth and extent of the torture inflicted on this child. The autopsy confirmed extensive blunt force injury, abrasions and contusions to the head, torso and extremities. Evidence of acute fresh injuries as well as healing injuries were present. With respect to Takoda's head, Dr. Castow noticed even more injuries than Dr. Leiker did, as there was bruising hidden behind the child's hair. Photos of the injuries are, however, under seal. The internal examination explored the depth and breadth of the injuries. When Takoda's scalp was reflected, deep bruising was observed to all areas of the head. Internal examination revealed internal bruising to the stomach. Takoda's back and buttocks also showed severe external and internal injury. Severe pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs, was also seen that could relate to submersion in water. Photos from the hospital also noted pruning of the child's hands. One explanation for such pruning could be related to submersion. However, that condition was no longer present by autopsy. Dr. Castow also observed fractures of numerous ribs. Takoda's digestive system was also examined. Common sense suggests one would find the content of the stomach to appear different than content found later along in the digestive system, such as the bowels, but not for Takoda. His stomach had contents that were a tan yellow puree-type consistency, which appeared identical in color and consistency to what was found in his bowels. External view of Takoda's back, buttocks and back of legs show healed scars and fresh bruising. On his back there was a type of branding of 4 letters that appeared to begin with the letter T. This is, by its location, an area that would be unreachable and is inconsistent with self-infliction. The internal examination is the most telling relating to the trauma of these injuries. When the skin is reflected, there are extensive superficial and very deep bruising over the entirety of the child's back. The deep bruising is in the right upper back, left upper back, mid back and lower back. Additionally, externally there appears to be bruising and swelling of the entire buttocks area. Internal examination confirms the bruising. The bruising is the full thickness of the gluteus maximus. Essentially, the entire area all the way to the bone is bruised and swollen. Also present at autopsy and observed previously by Dr. Leiker was significant injury to the rectal area. The anus has 2 half-inch lacerations. Internal examination showed the depth and the damage of this injury. The internal examination of the pelvic revealed abundant blood associated with this injury. The external injury is associated with internal lacerations that extend deep into the rectum. The most significant injury, as it relates to fatality, not even visible externally, was severe bruising to the back of the neck. Internal examination of this area revealed deep bruising through all of the layers of the neck muscle directly over the spine. In preparation for trial, Dr. Castow described this bruising as the type of injury typically only observed in catastrophic events such as a severe car accident. The cause of death for 10-year-old Takoda Collins was blunt force trauma combined with compressive asphyxia and water submersion and the matter of death was homicide. While Takoda was examined at the hospital, law enforcement remained at the Kensington address with Al-McLean. Shortly after Takoda's removal, Amanda Heinze and Jennifer Abbott returned to the residence with 3-year-old J.N., who was later determined to be Al-McLean's 3-year-old brother. Although Al-McLean initially maintained that just him and Takoda lived at the Kensington residence, it was later confirmed that all three, Takoda and J.N., lived there. When police arrived, they originally stayed on the main level of the home. Then, finally, the police was given permission to search the residence and photos were taken. The main level of the home was furnished. There was running water and food in the fridge. There appeared to be a security system in the home, as the TV in the living room showed live video of the outside of the home. Family photos were hung throughout the home. However, while there were photos of Al-McLean, Amanda Heinze, Jennifer Abbott, J.N., pets, and other apparent family members, there were absolutely no photos whatsoever of Takoda. On the main floor there was a furnished bedroom that appeared to be Al-McLean and Amanda's room. The room had clothing and was fairly clean and tidy. A mudroom had been made into a second adult bedroom and was also furnished with bedding and clothing. Also on the main floor there was a bedroom consistent with the needs of a 3-year-old. For the 3-year-old there were age-appropriate toys and size-appropriate clothing, but on the main floor there was no room set up for Takoda, no age-appropriate toys or school books, and no clothing for a 10-year-old. Nor was there a bedroom for Takoda set up in the basement. Only a room for the dogs with cages and the cement floor littered with dog excrement. In the living room there was a door that led to the attic. The area later learned to be where Takoda was living. As the detectives ascended the stairway to Takoda's cell, they noticed an overwhelming smell of human urine and feces. The area at the top of the stairs was dark and empty, except for a broken chair. When officers arrived, there was no light source and they had to use flashlights to see. There were no clothes, no books, no toys, only filth, excrement and bugs. 2 legs of the broken chair were recovered downstairs, one stuck behind the TV, one in a laundry basket outside the bathroom. Further in the attic was another locked room. When the room was unlocked, detectives found a bloody tarp and filthy lawn chair that they later learned was Takoda's bedding when he was allowed to have it. Detectives also found a dismantled video camera that had been used by Al, Amanda and Jennifer to watch Takoda, which according to Amanda Heinze had been disconnected by Al-McLean after Takoda became unresponsive, but before 911 was called. There were no toys, books or clothes for Takoda anywhere in that house. Days after officers originally saw this attic, but before Amanda Heinze and Jennifer Abbott were arrested, the attic was cleared out and cleaned, and detectives were able to see how light and clean the attic could have been if they had so chosen during Takoda's life. After leaving the Kensington residence, the investigation continued, including interviews with defendants, teachers, other individuals, and review of the evidence. As the details unfolded, it became clear that the only thing more horrific than the facts of Takoda's death were the facts of the life he was forced to live at the hands of these 3 monsters. Starting January the 5th, 2015, at age 7, Takoda entered Horace Mann Elementary School. Although they could not know the depth of Takoda's needs, those who taught Takoda recognized he could benefit from assistance. Although he did not have issues at school with proper restroom usage, he was sent to school daily stinking of old urine and feces. Also, on occasion, he was sent to school with what would be embarrassingly bad and potentially painful haircuts, making him vulnerable to ridicule, in addition to the ridicule he faced for the smell that emanated from him. The school was ready to help. They had donated clothes available and a washer and dryer where his own clothes could even be washed during the day. The teachers would send Takoda to the nurse who would assist with these issues. However, McLean strongly refused any help and was angry at any attempt of staff to intervene on behalf of this child. On multiple occasions, McLean called, enraged with the school for intervening. He strictly instructed that the nurse could not see Takoda for any reason. The long-term school nurse recalled that during her career, Takoda was the only child for whom she had to post a note in the nursing office reminding staff Takoda was not to be seen by the school nurse. Jennifer Ebert and Amanda Heinze added additional insight into Takoda's life at home during his Horace Mann years. Jennifer said that Al would give Takoda weird haircuts knowing that it would cause the children to make fun of him. Amanda said, and teacher confirmed, McLean wanted daily updates from teachers. Amanda would get those reports and she would give them to McLean. And unknown to the teachers, the reports would result in punishment for Takoda if they were anything other than glowing. According to Amanda, the punishment was to stand in the living room and hold a loaded book bag. Most days of the week, from the time he got home from school until it was bedtime, this was Takoda's life. On weekend days, if Takoda didn't have a good report, he would be forced to stand in this position in the living room for the entire day. As an active child, most days were less than perfect, and so his days at home were wholly consumed with this punishment pose. Although Takoda originally had a bedroom in the home, he lost that room after McLean and Amanda Heinze took custody of JN. JN, 3 at the time of Takoda's death, was given the bedroom, the toys, and furniture. Takoda was sent to the attic. McLean was angry with Horace Mann's school and blamed the school for repeatedly sending children's services to his house. However, when children's services did come to the house, the family was prepared. McLean and Amanda Heinze instructed Jennifer and Takoda on how to act when they knocked at the door. Jennifer and Takoda were to stay behind the locked door and not be heard. Then Al, according to children's services, would schedule a time for their return. McLean had Takoda prepared to answer their questions. He was to tell them nothing and act happy. Children's services had a host of resources to offer this family, including connecting them to medical or psychological services. McLean denied their assistance. He blamed the school and Takoda for their intrusions. He would take his rage out on Takoda, beating, throwing, kicking him, body slamming him. Any marks left behind would be covered by long sleeves and trousers. Getting fed up with the repeated interference, in May 2018, Al and Amanda withdrew Takoda from school, the one place where Takoda had found at least temporary refuge during the day. In order to keep the school out of their business, McLean and Amanda wrote in false educational plans claiming that Amanda Heinze, who represented herself as his stepmother, would be homeschooling Takoda. By then, Takoda was largely confined to the attic for the majority of every single day. Originally, he had the entire attic. However, in November 2018, Takoda Collins allegedly launched himself through an attic window, leaving Al and Amanda no option but to take Takoda to Children's Hospital. At that time, there was not an allegation of abuse, and social workers and doctors treated Takoda in the presence of McLean and Amanda Heinze, who again represented herself as a mother figure. During that visit, psychological counseling was recommended as part of an aftercare plan. However, as referenced by Dr. Leiker, the family didn't follow through with making appointments. When the social workers called Al and Amanda to assist in setting up that appointment, that help was declined as well. During this time, Al-McLean did call the juvenile court to inquire about services for children under 10. The court does in fact have a program to offer services to children and families struggling with mental health or behavior issues. However, when Al-McLean learned it was therapeutic help and would not result in the child being locked up, he declined that assistance too. After his visit to Children's Hospital, Takoda was moved to the basement while Al and Amanda walled off all the windows in the attic. When Takoda returned to his attic confinement, he was now in a smaller area, deprived of any external light. And after they made sure Takoda was locked in the attic to avoid his escape. In the attic, Takoda was deprived of clothing. By the time of his death, Jennifer Ebber confirmed that all of Takoda's clothing had been thrown out. Yet, despite being deprived of clothing, if Takoda came down to use the bathroom without clothes, he would be subject to discipline. The couple fixed the issue of JN, the three-year-old encountering a smelly, naked Takoda by only allowing Takoda to use the restroom when JN was asleep. There seemed to be a concern that Takoda may be trying to show off his naked body for JN, and as humiliation, Al would call Takoda a fag and call him girls' names all the time. Once confined to the attic, Takoda spent all day, every day, in painful torture poses created by his dad. All three adults watched the child from the comfort of their living room. If the child moved out of these horrific poses, Jennifer or Amanda would advise Al of the movement so he could punish him, beating him for disregarding the rules. The iPad recovered from the home had images of Takoda in these excruciating positions. However, all the photos of Takoda are under seal by the court, probably because he is underage and also until the investigation is fully finished. Takoda was forced to stand naked in the dark attic, bent over so his hands were touching the floor. He was to hold this pose from when he woke up till the early hours of the next morning. All day, every day. But Takoda's reality only got worse. As Al spoke to 911, Officer Evans and detectives, he repeated a theme about how Takoda would not stop eating his own feces, but he failed to mention that it was he, Al-McLean, that physically forced Takoda into this dehumanizing act. According to Jennifer, and later confirmed by Amanda, it started as a punishment handed down by Al. He became enraged that Takoda, who was confined to an attic without access to a bathroom, had defecated on the floor. He commanded Takoda to eat the feces. When Takoda refused, he retrieved a glove, picked up the excrement and forced it into Takoda's mouth, forcing him to eat it. Takoda tried to refuse, but he forced him so he could not escape. He began gagging as was forced to chew his own feces. After that, Takoda knew he was expected to eat his feces or face more punishment. The last hours of Takoda's life was detailed by Amanda and Jennifer. Al-McLean had been out drinking. When he came home, he turned his anger on Takoda. Jennifer, from another room, heard Takoda crying and saying no more, just like he begged his father to stop all the time. Amanda dozed off on the couch and woke up to Al-McLean punching Takoda hard in his stomach, consistent with the internal bruising visible at autopsy. I'm really glad that Amanda at this point found the beating of Takoda something to doze off on. Oh my god. I just have no words. The next morning, before Jan woke up, Jennifer called for Takoda to come down to use the restroom. Takoda was walking, but he was holding on to the walls. He would wobble and fall and stand back up. Al's response was to elbow Takoda hard in the back and order him back upstairs. Once back upstairs, Al gave instructions to put away his folding chair and bent over for his punishment pose. Because Takoda didn't move fast enough, Al punished him. As Takoda lay down on his stomach, Al stood on his back, forcing all of his weight, even reaching to the ceiling to push down his weight extra hard, crushing this 10-year-old's boy slight body. After this punishment, Al again had Takoda stand in the punishment pose and went downstairs to watch TV with Jennifer and JM. All the while, Al was yelling up at Takoda, calling him a mama girl and a faggot. Al then took a bottle of hot sauce up to pour on Takoda's buttocks. He admitted that pouring hot sauce on Takoda's rectum was something he would do as a punishment. It was one of his parenting tools and something he did frequently, even daily, in the last weeks of Takoda's life, according to Jennifer. Still not satisfied that Takoda was sufficiently compliant, Al threw the child around some more and grabbed him by the ears and dragged him down the steps. He then took the child into the bathroom and told him to clean his shorts. When Takoda again didn't move fast enough, he was told to move faster or he was going to be drowned. Jennifer from the living room then heard splashing and Takoda grasping for air. And Jennifer just stayed in the living room and she flipping hell watched and heard without even calling 911. Oh my god, so many opportunities where she could have saved the boy, so many opportunities where both of these stupid women could have saved the boy. And what did they do? They just enjoyed the screaming, the torturing, seeing and hearing everything. And even dozed off. Oh my god. Still not done, Al took the child back upstairs and from the monitor Jennifer could see the child lay on the lawn chair in the fetal position as Al stood behind him. While Al was standing behind Takoda's back, Jennifer could see Al making a repetitive motion with his hand. His arm motion was going back and forth by Takoda's rear end and she thought Al could have been using the hot sauce. But when he came downstairs, he tossed the chair leg behind the dresser. Al admitted during his interviews that the chair leg had damaged Takoda's rectum, but he denied that he was the one that shoved it in there. He tried to explain the rectal injury as self-inflicted by telling detectives he saw Takoda sticking it in his ass. He described asking Takoda to pull it out and when he did, blood squirted out. He later described Takoda inserting the leg into his anus, saying that's the kind of stuff he was into, before quickly assuring the detectives, without them asking any questions about this, that he himself was far from gay. And again, I have a feeling that this is happening because of Al possibly suspecting Takoda of being gay, of having this kind of sexual preferences. Which reminds me so much of Gabriel Fernandez. Finally, Al changed the story incredibly to Takoda fighting to keep the chair leg in his rectum, and Al had to wrestle with him to get it out and then blood started squirting out. This is the most ridiculous, made up shit I've ever heard. Oh my god. Al claimed he took Takoda to the tub to clean him up, but saw the injury was not too bad, just a little bit of blood and a little swollen. This is 100% inconsistent with the actual inflicted injury on this child. After Al comes back downstairs and hides the chair leg, Takoda never made another sound. He no longer incurred wrath by his perceived disobedience. Ironically, when Jennifer Abbott was arrested at the Kensington residence on December the 20th, 2019, she wore a cartoon shirt featuring the phrase, "I'd help, but I effing don't want to." But the truth of her conduct is worse. She was fully complicit in the excessive abuse, torture, and ultimately the killing of Takoda Collins. She and her sister participated and encouraged the years of abuse and torture of this child, in every way other than laying hands on him herself. She would monitor Takoda from the living room while he was in his torture poses. Although neither Amanda nor Jennifer would personally beat him if he moved, they would let Al know so that he would punish Takoda. They well knew his version of punishment was excessive abuse and torture, including beating Takoda, throwing him around, standing on him. Jennifer Abbott also reported incidents where Al would strangle Takoda, and she knew that his punishment regimen included physically forcing this child to eat his own feces. She also participated in the isolation of the child. She made sure he was locked in the attic. She allowed him out only when the preferred child, JN, would not have to see him. She got Takoda up in the morning before JN would need to interact with him because Takoda smelled and he was naked. Jennifer Abbott would then make sure he was back locked in the attic before JN was awake. Of these 3 adults who were in the role of caretakers of this child, she had the opportunity to have the most contact with Takoda. She didn't work, didn't have a car, she was at the residence most of the time, but she simply chose not to do anything at all to assist him or improve his miserable existence in any way, shape or form. Rather, she participated in the torture. And she flipping got only 8 years in prison for this. But we'll get there later. Although in the end she provided details which did assist the prosecution of Amanda and Al, any remorse shown came too late to help Takoda. She was the person that spent the most time with him. She probably was the child's best hope to break free from the hell he lived in. But she was just another adult fully invested in the abuse and torture of this child. The way she phrased it in her 3rd interview speaks volumes about her interaction and involvement with the confinement, abuse and torture of Takoda. Quote, "And he just likes to just dance around, move around. And so I just thought he was doing that just to make me mad, so I can tell Al that he was just not ever listening to me because whatever, he never listens to me. That's why I just gave up talking to him at the most part." End of quote. It was clear that she was categorizing Takoda's behavior as disrespectful nonsense when the child knew he was supposed to be standing in punishment positions from 7 a.m. until 4 a.m. next morning. She knew that if he tries to show disrespect, he's going to be punished, so how can she stupidly say that he did it on purpose to annoy her? Her remedy was to further isolate Takoda by declining to even speak to him at all. On the day of the death, she called Takoda down, and while the child stumbled due to weakness, she, just like Al and Amanda, categorized it as putting on a show like he always does. It wasn't because Al just the previous night drunkenly beat him and punched him and kicked him in the stomach. No, it was because the boy, he was trying to put on a show like he always does. She watched from the monitor while Al inflicted fatal injuries on Takoda and simply carried on caring for JN. After a while, she went to bed. She was awoken by Jennifer, who said Takoda was not breathing. Those fucking bitches. Oh my god, I really hope they get it in prison so bad that they forever, every single moment of their every single unworthy existence is remembered, and they will remember, they will not be allowed to forget what they allowed to happen. Oh my god, it's enraging me so much. Oh. But of course, rather than help or even call 911, these 2 scumbags turned their backs on Takoda one last time and walked out of the door with JN. Of the 3, Jennifer was the quickest to start telling the horrors of Takoda's life. However, even then, she initially withheld information connecting Al to the rape of Takoda with a chair leg. Even by her own words, she was fully invested with the torture. Her decisions for years to participate with Al's scheme of torture, excessive abuse and captivity made her fully part of this child's nightmare existence. Even when she witnessed him force-feed the child his own feces, she carried on with her role. Where she could have offered refuge or at least kindness, she chose to simply stop talking to the captive. Amanda Heinze inserted herself into Takoda's life as the mother figure. She held herself out to the school, to children's hospital as Takoda's stepmother. She had assured Takoda's maternal grandmother she would care for Takoda as her own child. Most devastatingly, she held herself out to Takoda as a mother figure. He even called her mom. This was the person Takoda should have looked to for love, for help, for safety. But instead of protecting and caring for him, she aided and participated in his isolation and torture. Meanwhile, Takoda was witness to her giving love and care to another child. Another child who witnessed Takoda being treated worse than an animal and could watch his captivity on the TV with the 3 adults. Amanda provided a home, worked a job, was in and out of the house, and could have gotten help and ended this help. Rather than end this child torment, she facilitated it by isolating him when she and McLean withdrew Takoda from school. The plan to withdraw would only work if an adult with a diploma provided an education plan. It was Amanda who prepared these documents, made the false promise of home education only for the goal of entirely isolating Takoda from anyone that might try to help him or try to intervene in their parenting. Although Amanda did plea and agreed to testify very shortly before McLean pled, it was again too little, too late to help Takoda. Even more so, her attitude throughout has shown no remorse for her disgusting conduct. Just the same as Al, they didn't see anything wrong with the horrendous torture they inflicted on Takoda. They both justified their actions by blaming Takoda's behavior. There was a recorded jail visitation between McLean and Amanda Heinze. Al was already charged and arrested, but Amanda was not yet in custody. The two commiserated about the living conditions they provided Takoda being the best they could do. They both asked each other rhetorically, quote, "What more could we have done?" End of quote. They told each other that Amanda was doing a great job working and supporting the family and being the head of the household. They comforted each other that the tarp was needed. Everything they did to Takoda, every bruise, was necessary. While Al tried to talk to her about his story that Takoda did the chair-leg thing to himself, Amanda denied any knowledge of that. But they were on the same page that their story is Al did everything he could to stop Takoda from hurting himself. So that's why Al hurt Takoda, so that Takoda doesn't hurt himself. Now this makes perfect sense. In which world, I don't know. Both Amanda and Al complained that every day it was a new show and blamed Takoda for always shaking his butt. So if Takoda liked to dance, what was the problem? He's a kid, for God's sake. So if you like to dance, then do we need to beat each other because we like to dance? Oh my God. You know what? Their whole story is just so stupid, and I can't even believe that they believe what they are saying. They believe it themselves, honestly. Oh. Amanda assured Al they were in this together. They reminded each other how bad Takoda smelled of feces and urine and were angry the police was saying Takoda would eat his own poop for nutrition. They even complained about how bad the attic started to smell, and the feces left there after Takoda was confined there without access to a bathroom. But throughout their complaining, their constant moaning, they skipped the part where they were the ones responsible for locking Takoda in an attic. They were responsible for Takoda having no clothes. They were the ones responsible for Takoda having no access to a bathroom. They forgot to mention they were the ones responsible for how Takoda smelled. In fact, they applauding themselves for giving Takoda a bucket to clean up after himself. They ponder what more could they have done. But they failed to mention it was Al that picked up Takoda's feces with a gloved hand, forcing it into Takoda's mouth and forcing the child to eat it. But what more could they have done? They are also both in agreement with a joint defense strategy of discrediting Jennifer Abbott to law enforcement. They also complain no one would help them. Takoda was too young for help. But these two idiots, they conveniently leave out that they were offered resources by the school, juvenile court, children's services and children's hospital and refused those offers at each and every turn because they were not interested in mental health help. They wanted Takoda punished. They also complained. It's always complaining. It's complaints over complaints over complaints. But Takoda never did complain about anything. But these scumbags, they are complaining. Oh my god, I want to smoke a cigarette. I stopped smoking 3 weeks ago, I think, maybe even more than that. But I have such an urge to smoke a cigarette because of these idiots. Oh my god. They also complained about the overreaching police department and claimed together that Takoda was not all that injured while they tried to convince themselves the child just had a heart attack. The couple was outraged that the police are focused on proving that Al was a terrible father. He wasn't a terrible father. He was the most incredible, idiotic, stupid, horrendous father. You can't even call him that. Piece of shit, I would call him, more likely. And Amanda assured her boyfriend, who force-fed the child feces and then murdered him, that he is a good dad and a good person. Oh, in what world was Al a good dad? In which world? Even Takoda's older brother ran away from home because Al started doing the same things to his older brother as he did to Takoda, but the boy, he ran away from home. He managed to save himself, but for Takoda it was just too late. And they also, Al and Amanda, they also affirmed to each other that if Takoda was here, he would speak for them. Amanda is so committed to freeing her unjustly accused murderous boyfriend that she even created, oh my god, check this out, she even created a GoFundMe account in Takoda's name to help Al-McLean, the same man who murdered his own child. And this bitch opens a GoFundMe account in Takoda's name for his own murderer. But rather than the murder or even tragic death of Takoda, what she was most focused on throughout the call and throughout the week before her arrest is getting JN back. In efforts to get JN, she appeared and testified in juvenile court requesting visitation of JN in the week before her arrest. She even testified about the events surrounding Takoda's death. She admitted Takoda was not breathing and she didn't call 911. She admitted to taking JN and leaving the house without calling 911, knowing that Takoda needed medical care. and she admitted that she knew that delaying medical aid, even for minutes and seconds, mattered to the life of Takoda. Even more so, she still didn't call 911. No, she just thought, let's just leave this boy here because he'll just be fine. Or even if he's not gonna be fine, what the hell do I care? I'm just gonna carry on living. Even still, she and her boyfriend were outraged that the state was suggesting she's unfit to care for JN. Oh my god. How did she even see herself fit at that point to care for another child? I cannot see it. For the life of me, I cannot understand. Jesus Christ. Amanda assumed a duty to care for Takoda when she inserted herself in the role of mother. That is not a role that can be abandoned just because you find a child you like better. She and Elle acted together as a team. It was her presence in Takoda's life as a stepmother that lent the appearance of stability when dealing with potentially intervening forces such as the school, the hospital, and children's services. It was her setting out an education plan that firmly sealed Takoda's fate, removing him from any hope of rescue. They were a team. The rhetoric they told themselves about Takoda and their parenting skills emboldened Elle to inflict unimaginable, constant torture on his own child. Torture Amanda saw, torture she would cause when she reported Takoda moved from a punishment position again. On the day Takoda needed her the most, she failed him one last time. She grabbed the preferred child and her sister and left Takoda unresponsive and badly in need of medical care. She could not even be bothered to make a 911 call. I wonder, would she have done the same for her sister? McLean has shown absolutely no remorse for the horrific life and death of his child. Rather, from the time he called 911, he attempted to claim the role of the victim in this case.
You can get the death penalty though, right? You can. For murder.
Oh, yeah, for murder, you get the death penalty for murder. Whether or not this is the technical case is yet to be determined. That's up to the prosecutors, that's not up to us.
But death row is like the needle, right?
Needle.
Huh?
Like you're talking about like injection?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Even on his jail call, after he has murdered his own child after years of horrific torture and abuse, he complained about his own flipping discomfort. He needs clothes, it smells, he's been denied undergarments, he's cold, he's hungry, he only gets 3 cold meals a day, that his bunk is too hard, or he's concerned for his safety. Oh, Elle, I hope you get all the torture that the other prisoners can give you, and I hope that you live a really long life so you feel all the torture throughout every single minute of every single day of your miserable life. I hope so, and I hope you will never forget, and I hope the other prisoners will never let you forget what you did to an innocent 10-year-old boy, the one who was your own flesh and blood. Al fully failed to acknowledge that he was living a dream compared to the nightmare he subjected his son to for years and years. Being naked, cold and hungry were the least of Takoda's problems. All these three bastards forced Takoda into painful torture poses, which he was forced to hold for 20 hours a day every single day. In the prison ran by Al-McLean, his 10-year-old captive was force-fed his own feces, severely beaten, strangled, crushing weight on his body, raped with a foreign object, and ultimately, at Al's hand, Takoda was given the death penalty. Al-McLean, while complaining about the injustice of his own incarceration, asserted to his girlfriend that if Takoda was here, he would speak up for him. But Takoda never had a voice. This bastard made sure of it. When Takoda was in school, he was isolated into silence. He was sent in filthy clothes, sent with embarrassing haircuts, and smelling of feces. In this manner, Al kept people away from Takoda. When teachers and the nurse spoke up for Takoda, he silenced them, demanding they not treat his child anymore. When the school would not stop speaking up for Takoda, he forever silenced the school by withdrawing Takoda from their protection. He silenced him in the home by forcing him to live in a dark attic, naked and alone. He silenced him with brutal punishment poses every day of his life, all day. He silenced Takoda by brutally beating him, throwing him around, strangling, pressing down on his body with his weight so he could not breathe whenever the child dare move from the excruciating punishment poses. He silenced Takoda when he shoved feces into his mouth. He silenced Takoda when on the day of his death he crushed the life out of him, standing on him with all of his weight. He silenced Takoda when he shoved the chair deep into the rectum of his already bruised and battered child, causing horrific ripping, bruising, and what must have been excruciating pain. Takoda may have been silenced, but the wounds to his body, externally and internally, tell of the damage all these three people did. The photos on the iPad, the conditions of the room, speak of the hell Al inflicted on him over the course of years. And those wounds and scars and this history cry out for justice. Prosecutors in Ohio asked a judge to sentence Al-Mutahan McLean to the maximum sentence of 51 years to life in prison for the prolonged torture and brutal killing of his 10-year-old son, Takoda Collins, whom he ultimately murdered with a final brutal beating and anal rape. In a 28-page sentencing memo submitted in the Common Pleas Court of Montgomery County, prosecutors provided the most details and thorough accounting of the last years of the young boy's life and what he endured at the hands of his 32-year-old father while living in the House of Horrors that was 1934 Kensington. I have already described everything Takoda went through as it is written in the memo submitted to the court. In early September of this year, Al-McLean pleaded guilty to 1 count each of murder, rape and kidnapping, in addition to 3 counts of child endangerment. Al-McLean's fiancée, Amanda Heinze, 30 years old, and her sister Jennifer Ebert, 27 years old, both of whom also live with Al, McLean and Takoda, pleaded guilty to charges including involuntary manslaughter and endangering a child. Al-McLean's attorney, Michael Bucher, asked the court for the minimum sentence of 40 years to life in prison, saying Takoda had behavior issues and often harmed himself and that Al-McLean threw him around before his death. Quote, Al, without reservation, accepts that his actions resulted in the death of his son. He does not forgive himself nor point blame towards anyone else. He does, however, express concern for narratives being offered by others, either vilifying him based upon a false history or recreating their own false history of involvement with his son. End of quote. What the hell does it even matter? I don't care at this point about any narratives, stories. I don't care about anything here apart from the obvious fact that McLean murdered his own flesh and blood. There's absolutely every single reason in this world to vilify Al. And not only him, he killed a 10-year-old boy. He subjected him to endless torture, beatings, rape, starvation, and everything that a child should never have to go through. All the while, the preferred child was cozied up and loved in front of this heartbroken 10-year-old boy. Al-Mutahan McLean appeared in front of Montgomery County Common Pleas Judge Dennis Atkins, where he learned his fate. He faced between 40 years in prison and 51 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole. Amanda Heinze, Al's fiance, was sentenced to a minimum of 22 years in prison. Her sister, Jennifer Abbott, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. How the hell is this justice? Why did Jennifer get only 8 years? Is 8 years the equivalent of a human life? Is Takoda's life worth only 8 years? How in the hell is this even possible? I cannot understand. And also the amount of times Amanda, Al's girlfriend, called the police on him for abusing her. Why did she carry on staying? Why the fuck did she stay? How could she watch on TV how could she sit there on her bloody couch and watch on TV what Al was doing to Takoda and stay quiet, stay silent, and even defend him after he was arrested? What more could we have done? What more is just unbelievable. You could have stopped him, you idiot. You could have reported him on so many different occasions. But then, just like in Gabriel Fernandez's case and so many others, Children's Services allowed yet another child to die. The police allowed yet another child to die. The police, when they performed their welfare checks, failed Takoda. When his biological mother called 911 on more than one occasion and spoke to the judge, all these people failed Takoda. All it took was for one individual to take this case serious enough, more serious than it was actually taken, and they would have found the appalling conditions Takoda lived in and the torture he went through. And also, why would Child Services announce their flipping visits? Is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. You give these people a heads up to hide what they don't want you to see. Everybody in Takoda's life failed him, in my opinion. The whole family did. Where was grandma? Where was mom? Where was everyone? I'm sorry, I'm really worked up because, yeah. So, thank you so much for staying with me and hearing me rant. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. I would like to focus on covering cases which are not really covered in the media, so please, if you have anything in mind, do let me know. You can either tell me a name in the comment section below, you can also send me an email. My email address is in the About Me section of this YouTube channel. You can also find me on Facebook, on my Facebook page. I am usually active mostly on Facebook and YouTube. For now, please give this video oh yes, I forgot to mention, this case was suggested to me on a Facebook group that I am in. Thank you so much for the suggestion. I'm really hoping I gave you justice with the way I covered it. Thank you so much. Please guys, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really does help me. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything. It really helps me as well with the engagement, and the more engagement I get on videos, the more YouTube will push it through on the platform. Thank you so much. Take care guys and stay safe. Bye!